This video will show you how to replace the rear brakes, pads, and rotors on a Chrysler 300. This will be located behind your rear wheels. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground and the suspension is hanging. To remove the wheel, we're going to remove all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts and we can get the wheel off of here. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a clear view of our rear brakes and our rear brake caliper. We have to push back our rear brake caliper piston. For this, it's going to be easiest if you have a small pry bar. Make your way directly inside this slot that you can see on the caliper. We're going up against our brake rotor, and we'll gently start prying outward. This is going to press in on the piston. We'll do this slowly. Now, once you do have that pushed in, this should be able to move, and we'll continue on to our 2 caliper slider mounting bolts next. Now, we'll be using a 15mm for each one of our slider bolts. You may find as you're removing them, the slider pin itself spins. To help prevent that, we can use an 18mm wrench. We're holding onto the slider pin. Let's go ahead and start removing these bolts. For that first one, I'm just going to start it back in a couple threads, preventing it from falling while I continue on to my next mounting bolt up along the top. Same process here. We'll take hold of the caliper and we're going to carefully slide this out of place. Now that we have that off, we need to have a look directly at our caliper piston. We want to make sure you don't see any fluid coming from around the seal. If you do, the caliper needs to be replaced. If the piston is still outward in any way, you want to continue on pressing it in. For this, we can use a caliper compression tool. Okay. That does not go any further. Let's go ahead and set this aside. We're putting no pressure on our flex hose. Now let's remove our brake pads. Typically, these will slide out of place. You may need to gently pry them out of place. Get that other pad off of there. Now that we have the brake pads out of position, I always like to remove my tins next. We should be able to just take hold of those. We'll slide them out of place. Now we can start removing that caliper bracket. The bracket is held in place with 2 18mm headed mounting bolts. We'll remove the first mounting bolt, a quick inspection, and start it back in just a couple threads. Remove the bracket. We will be cleaning this up on the bench, but let's continue on with the brake rotor removal next. The brake rotor itself should slide out of place. We'll just go ahead and take hold of that, remove it from the vehicle. There it is, friend. Now, prior to installation of any brand new part, of course, we need to make sure we clean and inspect all mounting areas. For the brake rotor, the area that we want to pay attention to would be our parking brake shoes, and then also the wheel bearing hub mating surface. As far as the shoes, just make sure there's plenty of meat and there's no miscellaneous debris. The hub surface, we want to make sure there's no raised areas. Now we do still have some rust in this area, but there are no raised areas, so we'll continue on with some anti-seize. As far as the anti-seize, you really only need a small amount. We're going along the outer edge here and along the inner ridge. There's 2 raised areas. Prior to installing the brake rotor, make sure you clean all 3 braking surfaces. Use some parts cleaner and a clean rag for this. Now on the rearward side, let's make sure we clean the port where our emergency brake shoes will sit and the rest of our braking surface. Let's get that brake rotor in place. Now, before we go too far here, we do want to make sure that our emergency brake shoes are adjusted properly. For this, I typically take the brake rotor, press it up against that wheel bearing hub, and I'm going to try to give it a little spin here. We can hear a slight drag. That's the sound we're looking for. If for some reason you find it's hard to try to turn this, more than likely your emergency brake shoes are over adjusted. If you can spin it and it doesn't have any resistance or noise, they're under adjusted. Looking behind this area, this is where the adjuster would be located. Now I'm just going to use a spacer and one of my original lug nuts here to hold the rotor in place while I continue on with my caliper bracket. Now let's focus on our caliper bracket. We need to finish disassembling so we can clean and inspect. As far as disassembly, take hold of your slider pin and your slider pin boot. We want to make sure we separate the slider pin from the boot itself without causing any damage to that slider pin boot. Now, as for this slider pin itself, you can tell that it does need to be cleaned. We want to make sure we have a smooth surface here all the way up to the very end where we can see this groove. The groove is where the boot will sit. If it does have debris like this, you want to make sure you clean it down. You can use a wire wheel or a wire brush. Now let's do the same for the next one here. Just take hold of that. You may have to use a small pick or screwdriver to gently pull these out of place. We want to be very careful not to tear it. Both of your slider pins should look exactly the same. Make sure they're cleaned up and we'll set them aside. Now it's time for some cleaning. The first areas that I like to clean are the areas where our caliper bracket tins would go. We're going to clean the same spots on both sides of the bracket. For this, I'm just using this wheel. We'll just double check to make sure there's no raised areas which could restrict the movement of the brake pads. This side of the bracket looks good, so I'm going to turn it around and we'll repeat this exact same process. Now let's move along to cleaning our slider pin ports here. For either of these, typically you would remove your slider pin boots, but on this particular application, you cannot. These are single-time use. So we'll carefully use a rag, gently slide it inside this area, and you can use a long driver, possibly even a screwdriver, to help work that rag around. So I'm just going to give this a quick twist here. Slide it in there. We're being extremely careful not to cause any damage to this boot. If you cause any damage, you have to replace it. We'll just work this around. We're trying to remove as much grease or debris from inside of that port as possible. Let's do the same to the other one. Now that we've cleaned the slider pin ports and we've cleaned our slider pins, let's make sure we add lubricant to each one of the slider pins. We want to make sure we lube the entire smooth shafted area all the way up to where the groove is, close to where my fingers are. That's where the slider pin boot will sit, and by having lubricant here, that's going to help prevent moisture or debris making its way into this area. We'll press it in as far as it goes, give it a slight twist, working in that lubricant. Go ahead and repeat the process for the next slider pin. Let's just wipe down the area. Continuing with our high temperature lubricant, we're going to apply a thin amount along each of the areas on the bracket where we had cleaned down. This is going to help with moisture prevention and vibration dampening. Now we can install our tins. We're going to take these and we're going to press them onto the caliper bracket. They should fit loosely but not slide out of place. Go ahead and repeat the process on the other side. Let's get this over to the vehicle. Let's take this bracket, we're sliding it over the brake rotor. We have our two mounting bolts. I've cleaned the threads and applied blue thread locker. Let's start in both of these mounting bolts. After that, we can snug them up and then torque each of these to 133 foot-pounds. When installing these brake pads, we're just going to slide them into our bracket. We want to make sure that they do slide in. We should not need to use a hammer to tap these into place. They should be able to move around once they're in position. Plenty of movement from both of those. Let's continue on with our caliper next. Now, as far as the caliper is concerned, before we install this and slide it over our brake pads, we like to use some high temperature lubricant along the caliper piston itself and along the backside of each of the two ears, essentially only on the areas that are going to touch up against our brake pads. As we bring this caliper into place, let's just double check to make sure that our flex hose is not twisted in a way that might restrict our brake fluid flow. We have our slider mounting bolts. We're going to start in each of these two bolts. Once you have them started in, snug them up. The torque for these will be 35 foot-pounds. If you find when tightening these, the slider pin spins on you, use your 18mm wrench to prevent it from turning. Now, one last quick inspection in this area. We'll remove our lug nut and our spacer and prepare to install our wheel. Once you have your wheel in place, continue on to all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts. We'll start them on, bottom them out, get the wheel safely on the ground, and torque each of them to 110 foot-pounds. We've got the wheel back on the ground. Let's torque these in a crisscross manner. Okay, friend, we showed you the installation of one side of your vehicle's rear brakes. The process for one side is the exact same thing as the other. After you've completed both sides, go ahead and pump up your brake pedal till it's nice and firm. Take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.